tirs.
Des explosifs et des missiles.
Commandant minutieusement mis en scène.
J'en tirais l'attention. Agence artificielle. Des méga-feux comme en Gironde.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Toujours parmi nous et notre journée se poursuit et on est heureux de vous retrouver en ce début d'après-midi toujours si nombreux pour suivre cette plénière qui promet d'être aussi puissante qu'émouvante.
Et oui,
dear Francois-Xavier, it's going to be very moving. Cool. We're going to listen to absolutely damning testimonies and from men and women who are constantly standing in the face of danger in the name of universal principles and ideals. Without them,
et où la loi du plus fort s'imposerait à tous. Car ceux qui sont à la manœuvre n'ont aucune pitié, aucun scrupule, et quand leurs bras s'abattent sur celles et ceux qui osent...
Mais ce qui est extraordinaire, Frédéric, c'est qu'au-delà de la bravoure et du courage
beyond
hors du commun, se font jour désormais de nouvelles approches. On voit monter en puissance de la stratégie, de l'innovation, de la créativité autour de mouvements ou de collectifs. Bref, du côté de la résistance, les choses s'organisent.
Les régimes...
The authoritarian regimes and the mafias and everyone
Nous apprêtons à accueillir sur cette scène ne sont pas du genre à baisser les bras ou à courber les chines. Malgré les intimidations, les menaces et les coups, malgré les enlèvements, la prison et les assassinats, ils se savent...
in spite of murders, in spite of the crimes committed, they are
Engagés, ils œuvrent dans des secteurs différents, mais bien souvent complémentaires, car ces secteurs ont tous en commun d'être au service de l'intérêt général, d'être au service du bien commun. Nous avons décidé de les réunir cet après-midi sous l'appellation des défenseurs de la liberté. Et vous l'avez compris, cette précieuse liberté, à leurs yeux et aux nôtres, elle n'a pas de prix.
Le terrain même de leur action...
okay. And the citizens became victims, and they became targets. While facing this inventory, we cannot be neutral, we cannot be indifferent and impartial. We have to wonder how we can protect them better. This reality of threats can be translated in many different ways, and during this plenary session we unfortunately cannot have a comprehensive approach to all this, but now we're lucky to represent humanitarians, the former hostage from Belgium of the Iranian regime who was freed a few years ago. And please welcome Olivier van de Castelle.
for the defense of journalists who, next to the humanitarians, pay a heavy price, let's welcome the editor of the NGO, Edouard Perrin, of the NGO Forbidden Stories. She defends those who are still behind in the prison of Evin in Tehran. Najes Mohammadi, Shirin Arkani from Iran. Shirin Arbakani, she is a defender of human rights in Iran. Another category of defenders of liberty who are threatened with the environmental. It's the environmentalist, the one who's going to join us on stage. She wants to salute the memory of her mother, Berta Caceres, a huge fighter for the defense of the environment and of the community, local communities and indigenous people. She paid for her life. 1 year after receiving the Environmental Hero Prizes, the Goldman Prize in every night of Alberta Caceres was cowardly murdered on 2nd of March 2016. She has come specially for Normandy for peace. She comes from Honduras, country with a very sad reputation of being there where the defenders of the environment are most threatened around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge applause for those who've decided only to listen to her heart and taking up the banner of her mother, the young Bertita Zuniga Cáceres. And our last invitees crossed the Atlantic. He comes from the United States, where he spent 28 years of his life in jail, 20 years on death row for a crime he had never committed. In 2012, he was finally freed. And since then, he is going across the world in order to plead for the abolition of death penalty. We're very honored to welcome Ndume Olatusani. Welcome to all of you here at the Abbaye aux Dames for this World Forum Normandy for Peace. We're going to start this roundtable with you, Olivier van der Castel. Could you tell us what has motivated you to start working in for humanitarian causes? Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me. So the work of humanitarian agent, it is actually a calling, an engagement, a commitment. And as often for this type of approach, there are personal elements, personal factors. In my case, maybe the seeds that were sown when I was a child, when I was confronted in a certain brutal way of a certain form of injustice. As you know, in Belgium we have numerous linguistic communities who sometimes don't get along, and my parents had decided to put me in a boarding school in the other linguistic community. And from my first years in school, I was seriously mobbed because I was different. Also, when you were in the linguistic minority, you had to do the step to go towards the other and building bridges to the majority community. And I think that was one of the key elements. Back then I didn't think about this, but now often I've been asked of my motivation. That was one of the deciding factors. Another element was maybe I was curious. I think that all our destinies are linked. What is happening in Europe is certainly important, but what is happening in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Mali, like Shirin is going to speak about this also impacts us all. And I had this wish to better understand, to touch the reality in the field, and to see the realities as close as possible to the people on the ground, in the field, and in order for the commitment and also to act concretely. Maybe the last element is the fact that humanitarian action is something that is extremely concrete. It's something that came out of the humanistic, that places the human at the core of everything. But we try mainly to have a very concrete action on the ground. And I'd like to repeat that humanitarian action is not made by machines. We are humans. We act for humans, with other humans, and with the aim to help each other. And I think that for me, this is something where I really very strongly, it's a fantastic school of life. Thank you for the roots of this commitment. Olivier van der Castel, you know the hardships and in the field. You're a professional. You're also passionate about the work in the field. You've worked in very difficult conditions, be it in Iran, in Mali, in Afghanistan, or Niger. And this, nevertheless, on the 24th of February 2022, your life has changed. What happened? Can you tell us? Yes. maybe tell you first that the jobs I had done previously with NGOs as a country manager, particularly for Médecins du Monde or for the Norwegian Refugee Council. I was in charge of a mission in difficult situation, and it was first and foremost my national colleagues who were most exposed to the risk. In Afghanistan, it was colleagues and female colleagues that were harassed on their work. In Mali, we had colleagues from Mali that were wounded. One of them who is mutilated for life in the north of Mali because of his car run on a mine from an IED. In Iran, we also had regularly colleagues who were intimidated by the police. So for me, it was an issue that I was seeing that the humanitarian action, neutral, impartial, was very often prevented, intimidated, harassed. And as you said earlier, now almost over 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, there was this hostage crisis that was long. In my case, it was a state that decided to jail me for no reason at all in order to put pressure on my country, Belgium, in order to obtain something from Belgium. I was a hostage. It was particularly difficult because the conditions were very different. Over 400 days of total isolation. I think that here again there are links with what Shirin has told us about the conditions in Iran. But Narges Mohammadi, he described it's called white torture, and concretely it's a will to make you lose any orientation in order to destroy your soul. And in my case, it was over a year I didn't know what time of the day it was. My eyes were systematically tied shut, and I didn't know where I was, and I had absolutely no access to my family, to my relatives. I had absolutely no information from the outside world. So I discovered, for instance, that the war in Ukraine or the death of the British Queen when I was freed a year later. So it was, for me, it was a very hard moment for me and for my family, because after having been a humanitarian actor who wanted to provide help and assistance, I had become myself in need of help and assistance. And so I needed to rely on other people. I need to rely on the activists and all the people who felt concerned about the injustices in the world. There was a true, very beautiful movement by NGOs that reacted, that took positions, Amnesty International, that also became active, the United Nations, and that denounced this arbitrary detention. I was not informed back then because I had no contact with the outside world, but it was extremely enormous to discover this when I came back to freedom. And I could never thank enough all these actors, all these citizens, particularly because they have been supporting my family, my relatives, and my friends who were affected by this injustice. And that is extremely precious for me to discover that afterwards. So I often say that there's not just me that was freed on 26th May. It was the entire community that was liberated, that was freed. And I think the solidarity is important to continue to be mobilized for people who are actually still in jail by this type of dictatorial regime and this kind of detention conditions. Olivier van der Castel, I think I'm very thankful because I know that after this liberation, you stayed for long months. You didn't speak because it was very complicated to share this kind of experience with the outside world. That was recognized as being victim of torture by UN and by Amnesty International. So we can really be thankful that you're willing to come here and share this with the audience. As you said, your freedom was on 26th of May 2023, thanks to diplomatic efforts, a civil society mobilization, in the whole of Belgium and beyond. Since your liberation, you have one project, one issue is to ensure that humanitarian workers are better protected. That is the aim of our roundtable today. The defenders of freedom need to be protected. I mean, the figures are absolutely terrible on humanitarian. Each year, on average, 400 humanitarians are killed, wounded, kidnapped, or imprisoned unjustly, and these figures are not going down, they are increasing. In 2023, the aid worker security report, it is estimated at 500, over 500, almost 600 aid workers around the world have been victims of attack. 280 were killed, 91 were kidnapped. It's really a terrible record. It's the highest number ever recorded. In reaction to this, you have created an NGO. It's called Protect Humanitarians. Can you explain to us what it consists? Well, when we are confronted with this kind of difficult episode in your life, thank you for the emotion. Yes, it's not easy to speak about it. We're talking about with Shirin about this. We learn to also manage your emotions, say that it's a strength and not a weakness. So thank you for that. So while all this was happening, I had lots of time to think during my 400 days of detention, of solitary detention. And I often ask myself, so should I stop? Should I continue? What's going to happen after? Is my humanitarian commitment continue? Am I going to give up? And in my case, it was very quickly clear, that I did not want that my torturers would have an impact on my commitment, that I wanted to continue my struggle for humanitarian aid. Of course, it's now different. That is, of course, the challenge of the project, is that this is an organization that wants to serve the humanitarian community. So I will not necessarily continue to be working in the field, in the countries like I've done before. But now we are kind of just like inspiring ourselves from the model, like the reporters or the journalists or the defenders of human rights, Amnesty International, Reporters Without Borders. These structures, they've managed to create collective communities that are going to advocate for all the people in the industry. In the humanitarian industry, that does not exist yet. While the Red Cross or Doctors Without Frontiers, they have victims. Each one communicates on their own wounded, on their own fatalities. And what we forget is these figures, because most of the aid workers that are impacted are local aid workers, people that are committed in their own communities. That's 95% of the victims are people, Malians in Mali, Afghans in Afghanistan, Sudanese in South Sudan. And these people, sadly, they have no spokesperson. They are not heard. When they suffer injustice, when these humanitarians are repressed, it's less visible, because more and more local NGOs and national NGOs that do not necessarily have a voice on the international stage. So there is not the media system. So now we have really an advocacy work. We want to communicate more on the needs to protect the people who are active in the humanitarian sector, and that humanitarian action is not a humanitarian concept, it's a completely global concept, and most of the humanitarian actors in all the countries are working in the global south, in the ground. They're not just Westerners working there, and we have a support function, so we collect funds. We always try to find support in order to be concretely supporting humanitarians who are victims, partly national and local humanitarians. And actually, for instance, it's less known. There's more than 20 humanitarian workers that are captive in Yemen in a complete media silence. And nobody hears, nobody knows about it. We are providing legal expertise. We try also on health expertise in order to accompany all this violence, because we see the negative trend increasing, the violence against the humanitarian work. And we need to have a collective answer on that. not each NGO managing their own events, but a collective approach to facing this violence against people who are really committed on the ground. For me, it's important to explain that it's not just a corporatist. We're not here to protect ourselves. First of all, it's the international law. Anyone who is a humanitarian needs to be respected and protected. That's the international law. But there's also two victims here. If there's no more humanitarian aid workers because they're not protected and they can't have access to the people on the ground anymore, it's the people who are in need of humanitarian aid that will not receive that aid. That is exactly what I wanted to underline. We see the kind of a normalization of this type of violence, which is, since we are dealing with people who this mission is absolutely fundamental, because the figures of 2024 are absolutely terrible. Today we have about 300 million people around the world who are in need of humanitarian aid, of urgent humanitarian aid. So we can see this the two coincides between the threats against humanitarians and that is growing, and next slide, the needs of the population start to conclude. I would like to remind you of a sentence you spoke a year ago at the Soliway Expo event we just met, and you said one thing that really touched me, and I was very curious if you could tell us more about that. You concluded your speech by saying we need to think about the humanitarian space, our space for humanity. Yes, thank you for having noted this, because I kind of said that off cuff. And for people who are not from the industry, it's true that in the humanitarian sector we often use this concept of humanitarian space, which is the space between where the helpers, the aid workers, can negotiate the access to the populations without being themselves targeted. And so this humanitarian space, indeed, for me, is a space for humanity, and we need to protect the space, and we need to reaffirm, and it's important to reaffirm the existence of the space, because for the moment it is really heavily under pressure. We can speak about South Sudan, Ukraine, Gaza, and it's this idea, I think, that despite everything we hear regarding the law of the jungle and the law of the stronger, I am convinced that, and I think that the facts demonstrate that the things that really are transversal to all civilization is the mutual help. And when we look at the history books, what we see is that not necessarily the stronger societies in terms of military capacity, but the most collaborative societies that have survived. So I can think that this mutual aid, this concept of mutual aid, we need to protect it, we need to defend it, we need to reaffirm it. And I think in a period where as a humanitarian worker, we try to denounce a certain number of things that we find absolutely incredible, like rescue boats that are being stopped and prevented from taking the sea. They cannot help the refugees anymore that drown at sea. Ambulances and aid workers in Ukraine or in Sudan and many other contexts are being shot at, or where people who, despite everything they've came in terms of identification, are being shot, killed, wounded, sometimes kidnapped, even though they're clearly marked as being aid workers. So that it's really fundamental, else we'll have issues understanding what to cling to if we can't have this idea of a space where the humanitarians can work safely, and also the space for humanity, or whatever the religion, whatever the ideas, whatever the opinions, the color of the skin, will have this value of mutual aid, of empathy, of solidarity.
Thank you, Olivier van der Castel. I will now move on to our next. We also move on to Edouard Perrin. You see that the purpose of the NGO Protect Humanitarians is to protect the humanitarian workers. You have pretty much the same approach, but at the same time it's for journalists. And before you tell us more about this and tell me what Forbidden Stories is all about, I would like to suggest we go back to the genesis of the movement. It all started in 2015 after the terrorist attacks against Charlie Hebdo in Paris. What are the things that led you to create these Forbidden Stories? Well, in 2015, I used to work with my editor-in-chief called Laurent Blachard, and first Première Ligne is the first broadcast company in charge of producing, for example, Lundi Investigation, Cash Investigation, and so offices are next to their offices, and we ended up watching the aftermath of the attacks, and we have the helpers, the care workers, and everyone was there to. It was also a very important terrorist attack against journalists and the community of French journalists. And the circumstances is that Laurent Richard was actually investigating what we call the caviar connection, everything that is organized in Central Asia and most notably in Azerbaijan. And in Azerbaijan, he was investigating a local journalist called Khadija Ismailova, and she was in prison in Azerbaijan. And she told him, "You have to continue my work." So this man, this Laurent, will be the founder of Forbidden Stories. Well, he wondered how we can actually protect, actually not really protect, but how, because we have a lot of organizations in charge of protecting the journalists. We have CPJ, we have many organizations in charge of protecting the journalists. But you try to protect the stories, right? Who's here to protect the work of the journalists? And Olivier reminded us that when you injure a humanitarian, not only hurt a humanitarian, you also hurt people who this man wanted to help, because they no longer have access to the care provided by the NGOs. It's pretty much the same thing. It's the same thing with our organization. What happens when the person in charge of conveying the information is put in jail or gets murdered? What's going to happen with this piece of information? Who's in charge of carrying on, of continuing to convey information? And I know that we have a lot of young people listening to us right now, and I think it will be important, and I hope it resonates inside them. The right to information is the right to be informed of pretty much everything what happens around us, and this is where the main pillars behind this new project when we launched Forbidden Stories approximately 8 years ago. And unfortunately, it happened after a terrible terrorist attack. It was after the murder of the Maltese journalist Daphne Carola, and is an island stranded in the Mediterranean Sea. She was murdered by a bomb in a car, and it's a very strong message. It's a look at what happens to people like you. Well, Daphne Carola was in charge of investigating corruption cases, most notably in Malta, and she was investigating companies, and some people were really annoyed by this, and she was more than 300,000 people listening to her. It's very much first project of Forbidden Stories. We multiply the audience tenfold because we've been able to produce articles, and dozens of millions of people managed to see our articles. And the name of Daphne Carola Galicia managed to be known. I don't know if you're familiar with what we call a Streisand effect, based on Barbara Streisand. If you try to hide something, people will talk even more about it, and that is pretty much what we want to do. We want to use this Streisand effect. We want to silence a journalist, and the fact that you attack the journalist leads to have more than 50 journalists in charge of conveying the same information. And we will talk about how we defend the indigenous communities. We talk about defending the ecology warriors, and because they're the first defenders of the ecology, and most notably in Latin America. But most victims are not investigating journalists, but rather people working in their community in a local local newspaper in charge about corruption, corrupted, call for standard, and they'll be on the list, on the hit list, and they will be assassinated. And we will continue, we will carry on for them, and we'll give a global scope to their info. And actually, it's very relevant because 30 minutes from here we have the city of Bayeux, and every year we have the prize for war reporters, and we know that many reporters are imprisoned all around the world. You have the war reporter, the investigating reporter, but the normal journalist, I would say, who can be threatened, can become a target. And you explained this concretely that in a certain way you want to neutralize the use of assassinating anyone because you are here behind them and you make sure that their work is carried on after the death or once they're in prison. And you support the journalists because they run their investigations sometimes alone and add forbidden stories. You keep on innovating, and you decided to create a safe box network. And let's see a short video about it.
Partout dans le monde, des journalistes sont emprisonnés, enlevés, assassinés, privant ainsi des millions de personnes d'informations d'intérêt général.
Entonces hay miedo, tenemos miedo. Y queremos seguir investigando.
Pour que leurs enquêtes ne disparaissent pas avec eux, nous avons créé le Safe Box Network. Les journalistes menacés peuvent mettre à l'abri des informations sensibles en les partageant avec notre réseau mondial de journalistes.
Es una muestra, honestamente, de que hay un respaldo, o sea, que no estamos solos.
Si Gabriela, Jairo, Jonathan et les autres sont empêchés de faire leur travail, Forbidden Stories poursuivra leurs enquêtes et les publiera dans le monde entier.
Forbidden Stories, an international network of journalists
designed to finish these stories and the investigations.
Va a resultar claramente disuasivo para quienes intenten frenar lo que estamos haciendo.
Y es muy bueno hacerle saber a quien está del otro lado que así le pase algo a uno, la investigación se va a publicar.
Los grupos lo pensaran dos veces antes de hacer una acción de este tipo.
I finally feel like I'm not alone anymore.
Creo que de alguna manera protege nuestro trabajo y nuestra vida.
Une phrase très très forte.
Very strong words. If you kill the messenger, you will not kill the message. It's true that with everything happening now worldwide, hetero para, and with the growing threat for your profession, are you more and more contacted by journalists in order to become a member of the Safe Box Network? More specifically for the most dangerous investigations we call the forbidden investigations. Now, the Safe Box Network was launched 2 years ago, and our organization was founded 7 years ago, and we are supporting the journalists. And the Safe Box Network is a second aspect of our organization, is how we can count on this, so we can make sure that we can help them. It's a good way, it's a deterrence, actually, to make sure that they are protected. And as someone said in a video, we force these people to think twice before attacking a journalist. And the system is quite simple. We try to secure this information in an electronic safe box. We're not the only one to do that. Everyone can do this. But what is unique is that with your information, you're going to send very precise instructions about what's going to happen if something happened to you. It became like the will of a journalist, isn't it? And I participated in workshops. It's very difficult to talk to journalists about this, but it's something that should be considered. It's a will, but also it's a way to know how and should we continue with the investigation. If it led to more trouble with the state, will it to more trouble for your family? So we need to consider the risk factor. And secondly, we need to know what should we do with your work, because the sources of a journalist are the most precious thing for them. And what about sharing your contacts? How? In which context? And if they are very sensitive sources, who will be in charge of this? And you actually try to disrupt this culture of the journalists, that they tend to work alone. They need to trust you. Yes, it's a case-by-case basis, and everyone should assess what they may need and say, well, if I'm put in jail, this is how we should proceed. And we have approximately 150 members, and we try to have more members. But in terms of concrete applications, we'll have to mention a case which happened last year. Rafael Moreno, a Colombian journalist working for a local newspaper, who was a bit too interested about corrupt calls for tenders and the damage caused to the environment, and published articles on his Facebook page, got murdered. It happened 9 days after we had our last contact with him, so it can happen very quickly. We were managed to contact his wife, to get access to his computer. It's pretty much like some police work. The sooner you're on site, the sooner you can talk to the relatives, well, the better. And then we have the second step with the company, with the associations. We have international partners who can support us, support our job. Newspapers in Europe, in North America or Latin America. That's what you do with Forbidden Stories in one of a kind. It's being universally acknowledged. And tonight we have the Emmy Awards. One of the films shot by Forbidden Stories have been selected for the Emmy Awards. Shall we move from Forbidden Stories to Emmy Award stories? The movie is a documentary movie showing how we've worked on the Pegasus case. It was in the newspapers in 2021 because we realized that spying software designed in Israel was used pretty much everywhere in order to tackle terrorism and organized crime. And it was also used to spy on defenders of human rights. It's what we call zero-click software. You don't have to activate it. You just can actually spy on pretty much everyone. So we were not investigating a specific case of a murdered journalist. We were actually investigating a case and about this Pegasus software, how we can actually target a journalist. As the same for the relatives of Jamal Khashoggi, who was killed and dismembered in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, were spied on thanks to this software. And we hope that with this movie we can get an Emmy Award. Why not? Let's see if we can get an Emmy Award tonight. Since we have young people listening to us, all our investigations are open access, are free, and we are a charity, so we do not want to earn money, but we always happy to receive money, and if you can. Thank you.
Je rebondis pour revenir protecthumanitarians.
Let's go back to protecthumanitarians.org. Same here. If you have a very wealthy aunt, you can give money to both organizations. Berta Zuniga Carceres, thank you very much for being with us, for accepting our invitation. You come from Honduras, and you will tell us more about the fight you You're fighting in order to preserve the environment and how we can defend the rights of the indigenous communities. This fight was started by your mother, Berta Cáceres, with the World War recognition, and she was awarded the Goldman Award for her fight. With great pleasure, first and foremost, I would like to say that. So I will tell you that my mom started a fight in her youth. She started from her grandmother, her mother, and women in Central America facing some severe struggles and difficult situations, especially after the Cold War. And during her youth, my mother helped her migrant mother a lot, but also refugees from all the areas of Central America, and she became a co-founder of the organization I work for, and with more than 85 community of the Lenca people. And it's located in the west of Honduras. With this organization, she managed to fight for the rights of the indigenous communities and the rights of indigenous people in the communities who've been living for centuries in these areas. And most of the time we don't have any title, we don't have any contract to show that we are owner of this soil. And she also fought hard for the rights of the communities of the Lenca people. And in 2009 we faced a coup in Honduras, and after this coup, many territories belonging to the indigenous communities were threatened by this coup because they wanted to grant mandatory contracts on these areas of our country. And on our territory, we have more than 51 rivers with licenses granted on these rivers. And so we started a campaign to call out these projects. And I was in love with one of the rivers located in the north of my district, whose name is the Hualcarque River, beautiful river, protected by ancestors, and a community of Rio Blanco. And the fight was quite hectic since 2013, and the river was in danger. And my mother got persecuted because of a fight and her resistance, and because the companies who received these licenses were actually getting more and more threatening. And I was also threatened. And I need to say that in 2016, she was murdered at our home by hitman paid by the company who was supposed to build the dam on the river. So the communities belonging to the organization, they agreed to keep on fighting to keep her memory alive.
Alors je pense que comme...
Okay, so I think that for like many of us, I managed to get the translation. I would like to correct a few things. It's Lenca, Lenka, and the river It's called Gualcarque. Gualcarque. I wanted to correct this because it's very important. As we already said, the Honduras, as with the defenders of the ecology, are most in danger. More than 109 Hondurans are killed for opposing dam. I think it's important to see a few pictures of your mother because she was a very charismatic woman. And let's look at a short video of a movie called The Illusion of Abundance. It will be shown tomorrow during a workshop. And in this clip, the mother is encouraging the villagers to keep on fighting, while at the same time, Tomás Garcia just got murdered, so she's fully aware of the danger.
Que vamos a mandar y no los chinos, compañeros.
Nosotras, digamos, veíamos ya para enero, febrero, que el clima de tensión estaba incrementando. Había un clima de tensión, había vigilancia. En una de esas acciones, en una manifestación, pues públicamente fue asesinado el principal líder de la comunidad, que se llamaba Tomás García. Él era el presidente del consejo, era, bueno, una autoridad también de la iglesia, una persona, digamos, muy reconocida.
Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros los pecadores, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amén.
Queremos aquí, ¿verdad?, comprometernos ante el cuerpo y el espíritu del compañero Tomás, que no nos vamos a vender, que quieren que se vaya ese proyecto, quieren que se vaya Nesa y Sinohidro, y tenemos también que ir a denunciar eso, la represión que hay aquí en Río Blanco. El sicariato que se está dando, ¿verdad?, las amenazas a muerte, ¿verdad?, la persecución que se ha dado en estos 108 días de resistencia heroica que tienen ustedes, compañeros y compañeras.
Contaremos la historia, vámonos. Transformaremos el mundo con amor. Juntos haremos la historia, vámonos. Transformaremos el mundo con amor. Juntos haremos la historia, vámonos. Berta no se murió. Berta no se murió. Berta se hizo millones, Berta soy yo. Berta no se murió. Berta no se murió. Berta se hizo millones, Berta soy yo.
Bertita Cáceres, j'imagine.
Berta Cáceres, I always imagine the emotion that you feel every time you see these pictures, and it's always striking to see behind these pictures. That's what in the heart of this man and woman is. What is the main weapon of these people is love, and there's really a contrast between the violence and these murders and this woman and man whose motto is that we can change the world with our love. Well, I think that we consider love not to be a weakness, but rather a strength. Something that helps us to work, so make sure that the river remains free, so we can keep on fighting for the community. Continue a fight, not only for me, but for my family, and have to think about the whole community. And I think this is what the hope inside our hearts is. We need to keep on fighting for the rivers, for the forests, against injustice in Honduras, but outside of Honduras, and in Latin America and outside of Latin America. This year in Honduras remains one of the most dangerous countries on the planet for defenders of the ecology and the environment. Everyone wanted to defend the environment. And approximately 10 days ago, a defender of the environment got murdered brutally. And he always talked about love for Mother Earth, love for their communities. And it's been 8 years. I've been fighting for my mom, for justice, for 8 years. And it was done secretly at first, but we managed to overcome several hurdles. It's tiring. I've been fighting every single day for my mother, and I continue fighting for the love of my mother. As you said, Bertita, you've been fighting for 8 years. Can you tell us? And I know things are moving forward. We had some judgments. Some people are convicted, but we would like to see the big oil, the big bosses to be convicted too. We managed to see some progress, yes, in Honduras. Impunity remains. I would say more than 90% of cases, people will not be convicted. But during the last 8 years, we managed to have someone to be convicted. In cassation too, and in appeal too. But the members of a criminal network, but there's two elements we should highlight. The judgments have not been confirmed, even though they were convicted 5 years ago. The Court of Cassation of Honduras didn't pass a judgment. We can see a lot of influences of several organizations, especially the one committing these crimes. So these people may be freed even though they've been duly convicted. And secondly, I wanted to tell you the people who pay for this crime will never see a court. And if we manage to bring them to court, it would be great for Honduras, for Latin America. So we need to keep on fighting, because those criminals should be brought before the court. And we're also fighting to make sure that justice, the Department of Justice, can continue convicting people who have been found guilty. So we need to keep on talking about this on social media, and we need to support our cause. And similarly, impunity is a very bad message sent to everyone in Honduras and abroad. And we see that if these people are not brought before the court, people will keep on committing the same crimes. And we want to make sure that this kind of thing will never happen again.
are just asking for justice. Maybe a last question, because behind your struggle, and we understood by listening to it, there's huge challenges that concern all of Central America. It's the Mesoamerica project around the building of a number of hydroelectric dams. And under the cover of energy transition, we are actually violating the rights of the indigenous community, and we're destroying essential ecosystems. We are in a complete hypocrisy, and you're calling for international solidarity in order to pressure the banks, the companies that are participating in the building of these projects. Is that right? Yes. We highlight the fact that this project, despite the fact that despite the murder of Thomas Garcia, who we saw in the movie, this project was stopped because there was an international fight, and actually this project, the Development Bank of Holland, of Finland, also a German company, that was providing the turbines for this dam. And my mother, when she was alive, she denounced in front of this bank that this is a project that is actually violating the rights of the communities. And they meant a commission of inquiry to look what was going on the ground, but they did not do anything. And on the contrary, a year and a half after the murder of my mother, these banks finally pulled out. They did not pull out because of their bad conscience. It's because they did not want to have the bad name attached to their reputation. It was one of the most scandalous crimes of Latin America, and that was really hard for us to stomach. And also they pulled out, but they gave half of the credit they had given was not paid back. So we have a law case against the Dutch bank in order to and for violating of washing of dirty money, and we're working on that. There's now ethical contracts between companies and banks in Europe that invest in Latin America or elsewhere in the world, that they have paragraphs in their contracts on human rights, and that this can be publicly denounced if there are violations, and that they do not finance death and crimes against people who are defending their rights, their territory and their tenure rights and their environmental rights. So these initiatives are very important, the solidarity, that they have these clauses, these norms that are being applied, not just for the European population, but also at an international level. Yes, she is really the daughter of her mother. Through your testimony, we measure the price of the fight for justice and the role of the legal force. Shirina Kanib, you are a lawyer because you believe in justice. Justice and peace work hand in hand. You were very touched by Mahsa Amini, a young Iranian Kurd that was arrested by the morality police in 2022 because she had her headscarf badly adjusted and that she was killed. This created a huge social movement, woman, life, liberty, in the whole country. If there is a strong emblem of this social movement in Iran, this is Narges Mohammadi. She received the Peace Nobel Prize in 2023. She is still in the prison of Evin in North Tehran. Her children, her Ali and Kiara, that received the prize in the name of her mother, Shirin Al-Ghakani. So you are the lawyer of Narges Mohammadi, and so you are the one who is going to be able to speak to us about what motivates her. Can you tell her about the life of Narges Mohammadi, how she... Yes, I thank you for this invitation. Of course, it's not easy for a lawyer to be able to speak in the name of your client, who is not able here because she is prisoned innocent in the in the jails of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Imagine a political system, a totalitarian system, that accumulates all the bad things that we have talked about around this table. A totalitarian system where the journalists are being jailed because they have done their job. A totalitarian system in which you imprison the humanitarians, which we've taken the liberty away. People like Olivier, who was hostage of the state in Iran. Imagine a system where the ecologists, where the defenders of the environment are criminalized because they are an obstacle towards in the face of corruption, or a system that destroys the environment. Let's imagine a system in which the death penalty is used massively in order to crush the rebellion. And this is the system that Narges Mohammadi is fighting, is the Iranian theocracy, a system where not just is going to do the worst violation of human rights, but it's going to do it in the name of God. And so I'm coming to Narges Mohammadi. Narges Mohammadi, she is first and foremost an activist, a feminist activist. She's fighting for the rights of women. Very early on, as a student, she started becoming active. I see many young people. It's never too late to get active. And Narges Mohammadi, she became active as soon as she was in high school, in groups, in work groups, in student work groups that are going to unite in order to think about the way they study and to denounce back then a dictatorship. And Narges Mohammadi, she was in these group of students, more or less because the Islamic Republic arrived in power in 1979. She wanted to have mixity. She wanted, when she was a student and she was doing alpinism, she said, no, you're not allowed to do mountain climbing with boys. And so the first claim she had as Narges Mohammadi was saying, I want that society, boys and girls, be able to be freely together. In the Islamic Republic, you have a system, a normative system, a legal system, in which women are second-class citizens, where you have laws of domination, economic domination, that are going to take away the property of the women. The women in Iran, they inherit half of what their brothers. By law in Iran, the patriarchal law, and I've already said, and the religiously founded law, because there is no separation in Iran between civil laws and religious laws, where the women are forced to follow a certain dress code that does not give them the right to choose to wear whatever they want, a headscarf or not, because the law makes the headscarf mandatory. So Narges Mohammadi, she's a woman who first is going to get active with her fellow students for the rights of women, and also to ensure that the discriminatory laws are abolished. So Narges Mohammadi, she's also a activist against the death penalty. She's the vice president of the Center of Studies Against the Death Penalty, together with another, Ms. Shirin Ebadi, which is another Nobel Prize winner a couple of years ago. And I just remind that in the Islamic Republic, the death penalty is practiced in a massive way, and it's a weapon to crush any political dissent. But mainly, and Narges Mohammadi, she is also a wife, she's a mother, and as she says often, when you are an activist for human rights, and particularly when you're a woman, there's always a moment where you're faced with a dilemma. The question is, am I a good mother when I'm in jail, in the jails in Tehran, and my children, Ali and Kiana, they are in exile in France? Shouldn't I stop my struggle so that my children can live with their mother? Well, Narges Mohammadi, she refuses this dilemma between struggling and being a mother. She says, the struggle I lead for the equality between boys and girls, it's also a struggle I lead for my children, so that my children, Ali and Kiana, could one day enjoy the same rights. So, Narges Mohammadi, For 26 years, she's been living once free and then back in jail, free again, back in jail again. And it seems that nothing can make her bend the knee. I mean, there was this video which she has recorded in her home. This is in 2022. She has just been freed for some days out of jail for medical reasons. She knows that the police is going to come and pick her up at the end of the afternoon to bring her back into jail. And here's her message. For me, this is really like the images of Berta Cáceres, these women who remain smiling, radiate this light, even though they are confronted each day to the darkest one. It's really incredible. What's incredible with Narges Mohammadi is despite the terrible conditions of detention she's suffering from, she still managed to smuggle out letters and writings in order to continue the struggle, to continue to encourage women, life, freedom, and also the international community, the entire world. Le Monde, the newspaper, Le Monde has just published an open letter, which you translated, and which she wrote and you translated. And from the jail, she documents and she denounces the crimes that happened far from the sides of the world, behind the walls of the prison. She speaks about generalized torture. She published a book at Albin Michel in March 2024 that's called White Torture. The white torture is which Olivier mentioned. Shirin Aldakani, how do you summarize all that? All these writings, what is the strong message which she's sending out? Of course, the conditions of detention for the political prisoners in Iran and a certain number of other states that do not recognize the freedom of opinion, that because of the expression of your opinions, political opinions, are going to throw you in jail, are going to arrest you, are going to condemn you to long political prison sentences. I mean, Narges Mohammadi, she's been going back and forth. She still has 12 years to go. She's already been 9 years of detention. And of course, she's been in and out of prison. So what are the political sentences in a state where the justice is not independent? It's a justice that is being handed out by revolutionary tribunals, so religious tribunals, or military tribunals, and this justice that is going to organize fake tribunals, and she is going to condemn her for a certain number of fake charges like collusion against the state, like spreading of false information. It's not just a destiny of Narges Mohammadi, because she is in the women's quarter of the prison of Evin, which is one of the highest guarded political prison in Iran. And next to her, you have intellectuals that have been censored, that have written feminist books. You have environmental activists that have fought against hydroelectric dams. You have a certain number of labor unionists who fought next to the workers because there is no freedom of association or no labor union freedom in Iran. So Narges Mohammadi, next to these women, continues to mobilize herself in the political prison, because what she's saying, and it was very interesting to hear, you can kill the messenger, but you not kill the message, because in Narges, she says the same thing. A couple of days ago, they were singing in the political prison, you might chop off our heads, but the ideas will survive. And it's the same idea. The idea is that liberty, you can't kill liberty. And if you kill the defenders of liberty, they pass on the ideas, and even if they're physically not with us anymore, we can see that these messages reach us today. And this is what animates the women of the Evin prison. One thing, these messages, they are smuggled out, but at an important price, because every letter which you see published in newspapers, each message that gets out, each book that is translated and published, these are people here that are going to get the message, they're going to translate them, they're going to publish them. It has a price for those who send them, and there is a judicial harassment. But for each message smuggled out, there's a new charge, a new sentence, and a prolongation of the jail sentence. But they take this risk because they think that we are going to use it wisely and that we are going to amplify their voices. So Shirin Narges Mohammadi received last year the Peace Nobel Prize. What does this change for her? For her, can this help to save her, or can it actually worsen her situation, considering what she represents for the Iranian regime? The Peace Nobel Prize is, of course, an opportunity, a platform. It's the reason why I'm here today among you, to speak about her struggle and more widely around the struggle of Iranian women. It's not going to give her immunity, because we know the Islamic Republic doesn't care about international prizes. Actually, the torturers, they also use they try to wear down the political prisoners. Narges Mohammadi, for instance, she is sick, she has normal pathologies, and she does not receive any treatment. They say, as long I'm not going to give you drugs, I'm not going to give you treatments at time, in the hope that their health is going to decline, and maybe if they do not renounce their struggle, they will die in jail. So everybody knows, we know that it will not be an accident, but it's really the torturers and the prison wardens will have to one day account for that. But yes, it's not an immunity, but it allows, nevertheless, to illustrate her fate and to call upon the international. We have here a certain number of NGOs that are present, which I welcome here, which have told us their support. And it's really this mobilization, the support of international organization, but also the citizens around the world, because when I speak about a mobilization chain, it's not just the international community, the vertical top-down, it's also the civil society, young people who are going to mobilize on the issue of human rights and are going to pass on the message of Narges Mohammadi and of the motto for Iranian women, because women, life, liberty, this is really a universal political project. Women, life and freedom, that is valid for Honduras, for Afghanistan, for Iran, for the United States and Europe, especially when you know that the rights of women are going back, are being pushed back, are being crushed around the world. So I think everyone needs to participate in this struggle. It's not just a struggle of Narges Mohammadi and the Iranian women. Thank you, Shirin Abdali, for this testimony. It is very interesting what you've explained to us at the beginning of speech on the fact that the Iranian regime really accumulates everything we're talking about. And so now I'm going to talk to Ndume Olatushani. You are an activist against the death struggle, the death penalty. Here, this is something we are also here on the village. You have the NGO Together Against the Death Penalty. They're invited regularly here on our forum and trying to speak with young people. Last year we had during our forum on resistance, we had Sholeh Bakravan, an Iranian woman against whose daughter was hung by the Iranian regime. You were born in the U.S., in St. Louis in the Missouri. You were accused of a crime committed in Tennessee in 1983. You were arrested, judged, and sentenced to death. Can you tell us your story, please?
First off, I want to say that it's an honor and pleasure to be here, and it's really an honor to be up here with you.
Keep the mic here, because it's really big here.
Right. Sorry about that, but it's truly an honor to be here, and I'm really honored to be up here on this town, especially with you, because I think I know how hard it must be for you to sit here and just kind of see this video about your mom.
A piece of advice. Put this here, and you don't.
Okay, I will. So I really am honored to just kind of be up here and be here with all these young people. I think it's important because they're going to be the people that go out and make sure that this fight is carried on. In my case, I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States, and I was convicted in a state of Tennessee, in a city that I had never been to until the people actually took me down there and put me on trial for the crime. The first time I ever stepped foot in the state, I was shackled, chained, and ready to go to trial. And in my case, the people knew I was innocent. It was not like they legitimately thought I was the person. They knew I was innocent. All the evidence that they used against me to convict me, they fabricated it. And the evidence of my innocence, they withheld it. It was only after I was sitting on death row for about 17 years before the truth started coming out about what they had actually done to me. I mean, I knew that I hadn't committed the crime. I was this young black male being accused of killing a white prominent person in a city that was majority black. And the fact that they was able to seat an all-white jury in a majority black city lets you know how the process and the system actually works in the state. And as I said, when I went to trial, the people used 4 pieces of evidence against me that they had fabricated. And one of the things that they said, the car that was actually used in the crime, they claimed that they had taken a fingerprint of mine off the car, but they was withholding a report showing that not only was my print not lifted from the car, but the place that they claimed they found my print, it was never even a print lifted from that part of the car. And the second piece of evidence they used against me, they brought in 2 eyewitnesses to the crime that witnessed the crime up close and personal. One of the people came in and said that he thought I was the person, but he wasn't 100% sure I was the person. And he gave his testimony about everything that he had witnessed that day, and when the crime actually happened. And once he got off the witness stand, that morning he testified, once he got off the witness stand, they went back out that afternoon and brought him back in because my lawyers was finally able to get the statement that he gave to the police minutes after the crime happened. And so when they brought him back, he testified that the only reason he had came in and testified that he thought I was the person is because the authorities had showed him several pictures of nobody but me, told him I was the person that committed the crime, and he just needed to come in there and point me out in the courtroom, which is what he did. And the second eyewitness came in and said that I was not the person that committed the crime. You would think that that would have been enough evidence to certainly not sentence me to death when you got 2 people, one saying that he was coerced into saying what he said, and the other one was saying that I was not the person. And so so that was the second piece of evidence that they used against me. And the third piece of evidence that they used against me during my trial, which was fabricated, excuse me, that I had a relationship with a brief relationship with a young woman at the time, and she came in based on some issues that she had with the authorities, and they paid her to come in and testify that I had confessed to her that I had committed a murder in the state of Tennessee. And so that was the third piece. And the fourth piece of evidence that they presented against me in my trial was they used the testimony of a person that we later found out was actually part of this people that actually had committed the crime. And so, like I said, in my case, the people knew I was innocent. And I was, I mean, when my trial happened, it took 3 days to see the jury, and it took 2 days for them to convict me and sentence me to death. And so, I mean, the whole process was, you know, it was already set up before I got there to convict me. But for a lot of good people, my family, and a lot of good people around the world standing up for the death penalty and in the United States, I have no doubt that I would be sitting here right now. I would have been executed, you know, like so many other people. that's been executed in the United States for things they haven't done. And the fact is that as long as the death penalty is used, innocent people gonna certainly suffer from it. One of the things that happened for me while I was in prison, and it is kind of hard when I sit up here and listen to her story, that 2 years into my imprisonment, my mother was actually killed in a car accident, and this is almost 40 years ago, and I'm telling you, it still hurts me today. So when she sit up here and tell me this thing, and I read in the news about her mom, that you're really courageous. You really are, and I appreciate that. When I was convicted, I sit in a prison cell that I'm telling you I couldn't even stretch my arms out wide. And the only time I came out of my cell, I had 1 hour a day out of my cell, and they took us outside in a cage. A concrete and wire cage is where you had your outside rec time at, and you only had an hour out. And when I first was in prison, we only got 3 showers a week, and it would take the people upwards of 15 minutes to come to my cell, first strip search me, chain and shackle me, and move me a few feet into a shower to only give me a 5-minute shower. And to make sure it was only a 5-minute shower, they had a timer on the wall. So when that 5 minutes was up, it automatically cut off. And there was certainly a couple of times where I had soap on me, and the people said, "Your time is up. You got to get out of here." And so in the United States, I don't know I'm sure it's no different for wherever anybody's at that's suffering from either sitting in prison and certainly facing the death penalty. Thank you.
It's very hot here.
It is a little hot.
C'est la Normandie, il fait tellement chaud en Normandie. C'est pas extraordinaire.
Isn't it extraordinary the tropical weather we have in Normandy?
It's a hard life, it really is. And it was no different from me. That I sit in prison for 28 years, and 20 of them was facing the death penalty. And like I said, for a lot of those years, every time I came out of my cell, I had to be chained and shackled and scooted around wherever they was taking me. The only time you came out of your cell was to go out for your hour outside and to go out to shower. Everything else you did in your cell. You ate, you slept, and everything else was in your cell. And so, I don't know, I guess in terms of trying to get people to understand what that's really like is really hard. But if you can imagine living in your bathroom for 20 years, then you might begin to get close to understanding what it's like to be subject to those type of deprivations, isolation, and everything that actually comes along with that in terms of just sitting there facing this penalty and having to, like I said, just sit there and be treated inhumanely through this whole process, because that's what it's really all about.
C'est un témoignage absolument incroyable.
It's an incredible testimony. From Nolume Otashulani, I just remind 28 years in jail, 20 years in death row. Only one thing that hell allowed you to survive during these years is that you become an artist. Here's 2 or 3 paintings which you've become a painter since then. So you can see these paintings on the website of Ndume Olatushani. And I just wanted to conclude as a conclusion, because I looked into your story and I find it very moving in terms of the spirituality. You have a way of saying, I was locked up when I was very young when I was condemned. But from the beginning, you knew you would get out of this. Sadly, you didn't know how long it would be. You said, they have thrown me into jail. My body is in jail, but they will never be able to lock down, to jail my spirit. How can you have this energy? And that will be the last for this roundtable. Thank you.
time I was in prison, I never gave up hope that one day I would actually be free. I always knew that I would be free because I knew I shouldn't have been there in the first place. And so I never gave up hope. There were certainly moments of despair that, you know, when I got an adverse court ruling, for a little while, I was in a little despair, but I always got back up because, like I said, I knew I couldn't lay down in that despair. I had to get back up. In fact, 2 years into my imprisonment, the worst thing possible happened to me. The people came to my cell and told me that they needed to take me downstairs so I can make a phone call home. And when the people came to my cell to take me down for this phone call, I knew somebody in my immediate family had to be dead because that's the only time that they would come and give you a free phone call. And from the time the people stepped in front of my cell and told me what they did, in my mind, I'm trying to think what my mother gonna tell me, what my mother is gonna tell me about one of my siblings once I got there. But unfortunately, it was my sister telling me about my mother. And prior to this actually happening, I was really angry about what the people had did to me. I was sitting there for 2 years. And but when I got this information, and you see this stuff in the movies where, you know, when something's traumatic happening, everything slow down and how they put this stuff in the movie. For me, that actually happened. When my sister was telling me this, if nothing in my mind was preparing me to hear what she was actually telling me. So when she's telling me this, for those few seconds, it's like I don't hear this, but eventually I heard what she said. And from that moment, in the next 3 days, if my eyes was open, I was crying. If I wasn't crying, I'm telling you, I was laying down, balled up sleep on a 2-inch mattress, a foam mattress, on the slab of steel. And on that third day, I'm laying down in this tear-sloped sleep, and my mother came to me as clear as I'm sitting here now, and the only thing she said was, "Get up." When she said, "Get up," I'm telling you a true story. When she said, "Get up," I jumped straight up off this bunk. After 3 days, only thing I was doing was drinking water for that 3 days. I couldn't do nothing else. I didn't want to do nothing else. But when she came and said, "Get up," I jumped straight up because it was so real, this dream. And it was at that point, I was literally able to get up. And when you talk about my artwork, prior to this thing that I'm telling you about now, it was a guy on death row with me. He was an artist. And I commissioned him to do a portrait of me because I wanted to send it to my mother. But unfortunately, this thing happened. She never had a chance to see it. In fact, the portrait that he did didn't look nothing like me. Nothing like me. And the whole time I was looking at it, I'm saying that I could have did a better job and kept my little money, right? And it was through that. It was through that and through art. I'm telling you, art literally and figuratively saved my life. It really did. When you talk about finding freedom and not letting this whole thing get inside my head, it was through my artwork because I was able to, in this 4 by 9 foot space, I'm telling you, I couldn't do this. I couldn't even stretch my arms out, but I found freedom. I found freedom in that isolation and through my art. And that's the thing that I'm telling you, literally and figuratively saved my life. It really did.
Ce sont des défenseurs de la liberté.
These are defenders of freedom, and please give them a huge applause. Olivier Van de Castel, Edouard Perrin, Berta Zuniga Caceres, Shirina Bakani, and Nenduleme Nolume Olatushani.
Faut se lever aussi. Venez.
Venez, venez.
Venez.
Merci. Hein. Merci.
D'accord. Le défenseur de la liberté. Bravo. Merci à tous les 5. Notre forum se poursuit.
Lot of debate until the end of the afternoon, so we'll meet again at the plenary once again tomorrow at 10, so we can actually to get that control on the world. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.